It's commonplace to speak of the Roman army as if we're dealing with one unchanging entity, but this is wrong. Rome had many armies. Under the Republic, different generals would raise their own armies and often find themselves in competition with one another. Under the Empire, when power was in the hands of one individual and all soldiers technically swore their oath to the emperor, soldiers would still identify strongly with provincial armies, regional armies. The differences between these provincial armies might seem to the modern observer to be relatively superficial when we look at them in terms of equipment, for example. But actually, these differences could have profound consequences when many different individuals sought imperial power at the same time. Alongside this regional dimension was another very important force: time. We're used to seeing Roman soldiers depicted in a fairly standard way, the lorica segmentata, or plate armour figure, who appears so often as a shorthand for a Roman soldier. But Roman equipment and tactics changed in response to new threats externally and cultural change internally. Rome had fielded armies for centuries before Claudius's army of conquest came to Britain in AD 43. At that stage it was already a complex and sophisticated fighting force, but centuries of development still lay ahead. The soldiers of Claudius's army would have looked very strange and unfamiliar to the soldiers who represented imperial power in Britain 3.5 centuries later. This week we're going to look at the organisation, equipment and composition of the Roman army in Britain. We'll look at the force that between AD 43 and AD 122 pushed north into what is now Scotland and then subsequently withdrew to the Tyne-Solway line where Hadrian's Wall was established. We will study the army that built Hadrian's Wall and the force that guarded it subsequently. And then we will look at the late Roman army, the force that was to provide Rome's military presence here right up until the collapse of Roman authority in Britain in the early 5th century. As we study the army, it's vital that we do not become too clinical. Yes, it's important to think of it as an organisation. It's vital to be aware of it as a social phenomenon. But it's also essential to remember that element of violence that characterised its presence in Britain. And so in our concluding exercise, we will tackle that head on with a forensic examination of one of the most dramatic discoveries to have been made on Hadrian's Wall.